Assalamualaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Camellias Bloom podcast, a support networking platform for convert sisters all around the globe. The Camellias Bloom podcast is a place where I share our stories of struggles and challenges which we all go through as convert Muslimas. This is a place where you can feel safe and supported by other sisters who understand where you are coming from. The Camellias Bloom is for all of us to rediscover Islam together as one, inshallah, and to let you know that you aren't alone on your journey to Allah. I am Khadija, your host, and let's get started with today's episode, inshallah. Hello everyone and welcome back to this week's episode 38. I hope everyone is doing well on this blessed Friday, inshallah, and had a chance to check out last week's episode 37. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, please go ahead and do so. And who do I have for this week's guest? Grab your cup of halal goodness and let's welcome Stephanie. Assalamualaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam.
How are you doing, Stephanie? And thank you so much for joining me today.
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you?
I am fine, alhamdulillah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Stephanie and how was your life like before Islam?
So my name is Stephanie, like you said, and I am Canadian. I've been living abroad, though, for the last 8 years in Australia, and I work as a learning strategist now in Canada. So I've just moved back.
Oh, wow. Back in Canada. So tell us a little bit about what your life was like growing up. Did you have a religion? Were you religious and all that stuff?
Yeah. So I'm originally from a Christian family. My whole family is still Christian. Raised in the United Church. And when I was little, my parents were really big on taking us to church. Both my brother and I, we went to Sunday school, read the Bible at night, prayed every night, that sort of stuff. But it was I guess it was a pretty good childhood. It was kind of based on those sort of old school, traditional, mom stays home, dad works, faith was really important as well. Mm-hmm. My parents really made sure that we had a pretty well-rounded sort of life experience, I guess. So we were in lots of extracurricular activities. We did a lot of travel throughout Canada and a little bit into the States. But I grew up in a really small rural community. I actually grew up on a farm. So my dad was a farmer. Yeah. So I didn't have a lot of exposure to other cultures or really people who weren't white, to be completely honest. It was a very white, very Christian community that we grew up in.
Right.
So, I didn't hear about Islam at all until 9/11, I guess.
Oh, wow.
It would have been the first time I knew anything about Islam. There was no Muslims that I can remember ever seeing. I did 9/11, I remember hearing about Islam and never sort of thought much about it.
Right.
I went to university in British Columbia. I didn't want to be sort of anywhere close to my family. I wanted to get out of that sort of area and experience something new. I wanted to experience city life experiences, right. And I did my bachelor's degree in medieval history, and that was really great. And I finally met different sorts of people, but I mainly hung out with sort of Christians. I was given a Quran actually during my undergrad and never read it. It's like the first sign or whatever was there and I just never latched onto it.
Oh, wow. So how did you actually come to learn about Islam?
Yeah. It sort of is. Yeah, I sort of learned about Islam during my undergrad. I had a partner at the time, my boyfriend at the time was an atheist. Mm-hmm. He gave me the Quran.
Wow.
figure that one out. He walked by the Muslim Students Association like table on Clubs Day, and they gave him a Quran, and he's like, I've already got one. Do you want it? And I'm like, okay. And because I studied religion, so I've done 3 degrees. I have a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, and all 3 have had to do with sort of medieval religion in some way, shape, or form. Wow. And I thought, I'll just take this book, and it might come in handy someday to maybe understand something that I'm studying. Like I was studying Dante during my undergrad, and Dante does sort of talk about Islam a little bit, not in a very nice way. I did take an Islamic art and architecture course. And that was really interesting because the professor portrayed Islam in a way that the media didn't, and it was in a really positive light. And I remember coming out of one of the classes that he was teaching us, it was one of the ones where you kind of learned about the 5 pillars of Islam, and thinking this is so much more peaceful than Christianity.
Wow.
And I can remember, I remember that moment like it was yesterday. I remember where I was, and just having that thought. And that was sort of the first time I ever questioned that perhaps Christianity wasn't the way. Maybe there was another way. And that was something that I never, you just don't think of where I'm from. Like, you're a Christian, everyone's a Christian, you don't question it. And I don't know, I guess that sort of, that feeling of you don't question anything just stuck. And I didn't pursue that thought, and I didn't sort of continue studying Islam. I went on and I did a master's. I sort of had a lot of sort of atheist friends during my master's degree. I didn't sort of stop believing. Probably would say I was a bit agnostic. The people that you are around really affect the way that you think.
Yeah.
And when you have a lot of people around you that just don't believe, you start to kind of question things. When I first moved to the UK to take my master's, I was really disillusioned with how everyone was just partying and really materialistic and all that kind of stuff. And I did dig into Christianity quite deeply within that first sort of 2 months as something to kind of hold on to, something to try to anchor myself. But it didn't stick. Right. Like, people that were around me really kind of dragged me down. I was like, okay, maybe there's something, maybe there's not anything. And I never considered my faith again until I moved to Australia. And I met Muslims for the first time when I moved to Australia. That was 8 years ago now. It was first, apparently I had actually met a Muslim before that. My dad tells me when I was working at a college between my master's and my PhD, college that's back home, there was a lady that I'd met who was Muslim. And I didn't know that she was, because I just didn't think Muslims existed where we were. And he said to me, he's like, oh yeah, so-and-so is a Muslim. And I'm like, how do you know that? And he's like, well, she wears a headscarf. And I'm like, I thought she had cancer. It was just it's a horrible thing to say, but you just didn't exist in that area where I lived. Then I met Muslims who were, they wore hijab and they were nothing like what I heard on TV. I became really good friends with some Muslim sisters, and I started dating a Muslim man in the first year of my PhD. And I thought, gosh, I better do a little bit of research into this Islam to make sure I don't inadvertently say something insulting to somebody. I wanted to try to be as respectful as I could. Right. And because my partner said it was super important to him, I was like, well, then it needs to be important to me as well. The more I sort of read, the more I realized it's what I believed all along. Always kind of in the back of my mind as a kid, it never totally made sense to me why I had to pray to Jesus and to God. And I didn't really get why I couldn't just pray to God. Why do I need a middleman? Why can't I just go right up to him and speak to him? I used to pray, and I used to actually pray a lot when I was a kid, as a tween. I used to a lot because I was just, I don't know, I got teased a lot at school and stuff. And so I was really looking for kind of that support, when I wanted answers and things. And I used to sort of in my prayer I basically sort of say to Jesus, no offense. It's not that I don't want to talk to you, but I really just want to talk to God right now. And I just want to pray to him right now, but it's not like I don't like you. And I used to sort of have to, like, I felt like I was having to justify why I wanted to speak to God and not sort of pray to and through Jesus. And when I started learning that Islam is all about that, there's no middleman. There's no worshiping a person. You're not worshiping Jesus. You're just worshiping God. I was like, oh, that makes a ton of sense. Like, this clicks. And the more I learned to try to make sure that I was being polite to my friends, the more I just realized that this not just made sense, but what I was already sort of kind of practicing. Like, I was already dressing modestly because it felt wrong not to. Wearing sort of tight clothes and shorts and that kind of stuff just never made sense to me. And I didn't end up sort of staying with that guy for particularly long. I think it was only 2 months. And it wasn't, it was an amicable sort of breakup because neither of our families were going to accept the other. Mm-hmm. His family were like, well, she's not Muslim. And my family was like, he is Muslim. But I didn't sort of stop researching after that. It just kind of just stuck. And I only sort of had the internet to go with. I didn't know where to get information from. And it's just a quagmire of all sorts of bad stuff out there. Mm-hmm. And it was probably about 6 months after I started learning about Islam, I felt ready to take my Shahada. But I ended up reading something on the internet about Allah being a moon god. What? And that and it just completely like quashed that feeling. But it never went away. Like, I'd read something really negative on the internet and I would stop learning about Islam and I'd go, no, this can't be it. And then something just inside, something in my heart just kind of kept pulling me back, going, no, you gotta give this another go. You gotta give it another chance. Wow. And it just was really, it took 4 years. I basically studied Islam for 4 years, and it was kind of a tug of war the whole time. I, felt like it was right, but then I also thought if I became a Muslim, I would have to give up so much. Mm-hmm. And part of that would probably be my family. I kept trying to kind of justify, like, could I find Islam within Christianity? And could I just somehow keep calling myself a Christian? Because that would be a heck of a lot easier. And I went back and started studying the Bible again. And I guess the nail in the coffin for Christianity for me was going to a Bible study. And I had a study Bible. I had this Oxford Bible. It was huge and had essays and stuff in it. And we were studying the book of John. And so you open to the book of John and it talks about, how, like, I am the light and the way and all of that. And I opened my book of John and it's an essay. And it starts off with an essay about how the book of John came to be, like who wrote it. And it was nothing like what I had learned in Sunday school. Like, in Sunday school, you learned that, like, John is written by a guy named John. And I'm reading this essay, and it's not written by a man named John. Like, maybe there was a guy named John at some point in the line, but it was written by a whole bunch of different people. And, so many more years after the rest of the Gospels, the other 3 books of the Gospels. And they're, the other people that were in this study group with me, they're talking about how much they love John and he's their favorite disciple and he's, someone they want to look up to and be like. And I'm reading this essay that is just saying the exact opposite to everything they're thinking. Like, everything they're thinking is not true. And I thought, how can I believe in a book that hasn't been written by one person? Like, so many different people have touched it and changed it and written it. And there's so many contradictions. Right. And I went home after that Bible study. I never went back to the Bible study again. And I actually told my dad that night what I had learned from reading my study Bible. And I said, I don't know how I go on as a Christian from this point. And he said, well, they're good stories and stuff. You can still be a Christian. But that was a nail in the coffin. I was like, nah, like, this isn't clicking. Right. And I guess I made sort of really sincere dua for Allah to guide me to what was the truth. Mm-hmm. Is it Islam or is it Christianity? And the truth is buried in there. And it was, used to be in the gospel, not when we have it now.
So did you take your Shahada after that, or when did you take your Shahada?
So it took 4 years before where I got to the point where I did take Shahada. And it was ultimately,
So did you have like an aha moment, or was it more of a gradual process, you would say?
there wasn't sort of a trigger. It was like this sort of gradual building of truths and proofs. And it needed to be like 100%.
Right.
You know, because I knew I was going to have to defend my decision to my family. And I needed to make sure that there was no contradiction. There was no way that they could say no. I had to be able to defend my choice. And I wanted to make sure that I could do it. Like, I wanted to make sure that if I was going to do something radical, if you will, like change my life and change my faith, that I could live it and I could do justice to it. And I started wearing hijab before I took Shahada.
Wow.
I didn't wear it. I didn't wear it all the time. I wore it. I did the, the International Hijab Day. It was the first time I wore it out in public. And I decided I was going to wear it for a week. I wasn't just going to do the day because I thought that was too tokenistic. And somehow in my mind, I thought a week was better. But it was around the same time that there had been an attack in Australia on a Muslim woman, and her hijab had been taken off. And my friends were quite scared. And I thought, heck, I'm thinking about Islam quite seriously. And I hadn't told anyone how serious I was about it at this point. I wonder if I can do this. I wonder if I can wear the hijab. So I kind of passed it off as I'm doing International Hijab Day, but it was also me testing waters.
Right.
And after a week, I was like, I really don't want to take this off.
Wow.
So I decided I'm going to do it for a month. And the first day was terrifying. By the last day of the month, I cried when I took it off at the end of that month. It felt like I'd taken a piece of myself off.
Wow.
And so I sort of knew that, like, I don't know how to describe this, but it's like little things like that I did sort of said to me, there's something right about this. And it wasn't until, years later that I learned about fitra.
Right.
And how all of these things, the reason why things feel the way they do and they feel right Islamically is because it's true.
Right.
So I was wearing hijab. I fasted 2 Ramadans before I took Shahada. And I guess sort of if you want to call it an aha moment, was I was sitting in the musalla because I'd started going to halakas to learn more. And I met a sister in the musalla one day, and she said, you wear hijab, you fast, you do everything that a Muslim. I was learning to pray at this stage as well. And I would pray with the sisters in the musalla. And she said, you do everything except take Shahada. Why don't you take Shahada? And I said, oh, I don't know. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's time. I don't think I can be Muslim. And she was a revert herself too. And it wasn't too terribly long after that there was one day I just had this overwhelming urge that I got to do it today. And it was the day that they were doing a dawah table on campus. And I got there and they'd already closed the dawah table, but they had a halakha right afterwards. So I went to the halakha afterwards, and just throughout the whole halakha, my heart is saying, you have to take Shahada today. You have to take it today. And I asked the sisters, there was 10 minutes at the end of the meeting. And I said, I have a question. How long does it take to say Shahada? And they said, it can take years of study and stuff. And I'm like, no, like right now. Like this very minute, how long does it take? And then there was people crying and yelling and screaming and everything. And it was that was at the end of 4 years. That was 2016.
Wow. Okay. So when did you end up taking your Shahada then?
I took my Shahada in August.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was 4 years of sort of studying. And it was I can't explain it. It was just this one day. It just woke up with this urge that if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it.
Right.
Like, it has to be today.
And how did you feel when you took your Shahada?
It felt like I'd taken a weight off my shoulders.
Right.
To be honest, like it felt like, I think because inside I was wrestling with it for so long, and I knew Islam was true, but I was scared. I was scared to admit it, like publicly admit it. And I was doing all these things. Like I was trying to pray as best I could. You know, I was reaching out to Allah every day. Like I was really just afraid to make it public to everybody. And when I actually said the Shahada, it felt like this weight had been lifted and I was finally myself.
Wow.
Like it felt like I could be free, I could be me. And I hear about other people who take Shahada and they cry and they feel lighter and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't sort of have that. It was just a release.
Right. It was like, finally.
Finally. Yeah. I was like, finally I'm me. Like there had been so much, there'd been tears and frustrations and all sorts of stuff leading up to that moment. And then the day that I did it, I was just like, yes, like I've done it, you know?
Right.
And I just felt really good. Like I just felt a peace afterwards. So yeah.
Wow. That is such a journey.
That was crazy. It's crazy, but I can honestly say that I can see how Allah has guided me to it.
Right.
Like every step, even just, my dad used to say to me, he's like, isn't it amazing how you've ended up in Australia to do your PhD? You know, the steps that you had to take to get there. And I think all of those steps were Allah leading me to Australia to meet those friends that made me think I need to learn about Islam, you know, to be nice to them.
Right.
But it's actually Allah leading me to him in this really roundabout, very academic way.
Right. And, you know, which is like suitable for the type of person you are.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. I mean, I think it was the journey that I needed. It included the steps that made me mature enough to be able to take that step. Mm-hmm. It's amazing to kind of look back on it.
Of course. And so after you became Muslim, you know, what was the transition like? Was it difficult?
I mean, because I'd fasted Ramadan before and I'd wore the hijab, those were things that weren't hard to do. I loved wearing the hijab and I felt pretty comfortable in it. I think the hardest thing was, it wasn't hard to transition in front of my friends because they had seen that process. So all of my Australian friends, they all said, finally, you know, they said, we have been watching you for 4 years study this religion and start to implement it in your life. And we've all just been waiting for the day that you realize you're a Muslim. Wow. And I was like, wow. And that's coming from like friends that are atheist and Buddhist and like not Muslim friends.
Wow.
So it wasn't hard to kind of start wearing the hijab in front of them or fasting or any of that kind of stuff. The challenge was with my parents. I knew they wouldn't take it well, so I wasn't really super open about how I was studying about Islam. I would say to them, you know, like I'm going to a course or I'm going with my friend to break fast with her or something like that. I would make little comments like that. And they did ask me at one point, you know, would you ever convert to Islam? And I said, no, of course not. And I can honestly say that when I did say that to them, that was the honest truth. I could not imagine myself becoming a Muslim. I mean, when I did take Shahada and I didn't know how to break the news to them. I knew there'd probably be some yelling. I wrote my parents a letter, an email, and explained why the news was coming as an email. I told them it was about 6 months after I took Shahada. I told them because I wanted to wear the hijab full time. And I knew that was going to come out on Facebook at some point. And when you grow up in a small town and there are people that you know on your Facebook from that town, like the whole town is going to find out, right? And so I explained to them that I wanted to be honest. I wanted to stop hiding. They didn't take it well. The first phone call we had after that, which was about a day after I told them, there was the predicted yelling and threatened to disown me and said a lot of, it really was not good. They said a lot of things that I really don't think a person should say to anybody. We're still working on repairing that relationship. So that's been hard. Like they haven't been accepting of it. They don't want to believe I chose this because I believe in it. I went home, sort of reverted in the August. I went home in June because my brother got married. And my parents said to me, you know, when you come home, no one can know you're Muslim. You're not going to run around wearing your little black dress and your hijab. You know, the hubab is what my dad called it, your hubab. And he's like, you're going to look like everybody else. Okay, you're not going to pray. You're going to eat what we tell you to eat. You're going to dress how we tell you to dress. Like my mom dictated what was to be in my suitcase.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was really hard transitioning with them. And my parents said, don't tell your grandparents. My grandfathers were still alive at the time. One of them has since passed. The other one is still alive. And they said, unless you want to be responsible for their premature deaths, don't tell them, they'll have heart attacks.
Wow.
So I lived sort of a double life for the 2 years. Starting from basically my brother's wedding. I would go home, I would take off my hijab. I said, I'm going to be dressing in a way that is modest and respectful and will pass as such in a Christian community, and, pretend to not be Muslim. I would hide in the bathroom and do my prayers in the bathroom because it was the only place in the house that I could kind of do it without getting caught.
Wow.
I would pretend I would go to have a shower, turn the shower on, do my prayers. So my parents probably think I was really clean. But, and I would combine them. Like I did what I had to do to get them in. Transitioning with my family has been hard, and it was made easier, I guess, when I got married. When we got married, I was very upfront about and I said, I don't wear hijab in front of them. I don't pray in front of them. I don't even talk about Islam. And he said, well, you know what? You've got to stop living two lives. You got to be you, and it's exhausting trying to be two people. And grateful that Allah has put him in my life, because I've actually been able to completely embrace who I am as a Muslim. It's funny. They're much more accepting now.
Wow, subhanallah. So what about sisterhood? Can you tell me a little bit about sisterhood when you became Muslim? Did you find sisterhood?
I was blessed to have a really good group of, I'm going to say born Muslim. Like I never know what to say as someone who's born into a Muslim family, but born Muslims that were in the halakha that I attended at university. They were the ones I took my Shahada with. There was no reverts in the group. I was the first revert. That was a really great sisterhood, but there were certain things that they couldn't understand because they weren't a revert. And I found a revert community, and I was engaged with them for probably a year before I had any kind of real issues. And the sisters they had like the good intentions, they're trying to encourage everyone to the best of practice, but they were insisting that everyone be wearing black and everyone be wearing niqab, and you shouldn't work as a sister, and you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. Like it was a very particular way of practicing Islam that they wanted you to follow. I wasn't at that stage. And there was a lot of sisters in this group that weren't at that stage. Like we were new. And there were some that had embraced Islam and like they'd never wore hijab before or anything. Like I was steps ahead of some of the new sisters that were joining us. I actually ended up with a question, and I can't remember exactly what the question was now. It had something to do with Jesus. And I asked the question to a sister that I considered really knowledgeable in that group, and she just freaked out and told me that I didn't have strong faith, and I just had to believe. Yeah. Like, and her response was, you just have to believe. And that was one of the things I never liked being told by a minister. Right. As a Christian, you just have to believe. And I actually stopped practicing. I left that group because they were just trying to push their version or whatever you want to call it on me so hard. Didn't just leave that group, I left my born Muslim friends as well, because I was just so disillusioned that I couldn't get this answer. And I took off the hijab.
Oh wow. And when did this all actually happen?
About a year after I took Shahada, took off the hijab. I actually stopped praying. I was so upset. I mean, alhamdulillah, Allah never gave up on me, and I'm so grateful for that, because it was probably 2 months, 3 months. And there was something inside that just said, there has to be a logical explanation for that answer, for that question you had. And there was a sheikh in Sydney that I knew of. And I thought, you know what? She's a revert. I'm going to ask her this question. And if she can't answer it, then I'm done with Islam. Like I was there. I was at that point. I was so put off by that group of sisters. SubhanAllah, she answered the question in such a beautiful way. And I put the hijab on the next day and I went back to praying. Honestly, it's so important. And I think sisterhood really is all about understanding. I could have been gone for good, and I know other sisters that left, and they stopped. They left the group. I know I wasn't the only sister that left that group. And you join a revert group as a revert, I think, because you're looking for that shared experience. We all have we have some difficult transitions, and we all have a story that comes with our Shahada, and we've all come to Allah from a different place, a different belief system. And it's not that born Muslims don't understand, but sometimes they don't. Like there's just certain things that they just don't get. For me, finding sisters that just will listen and they won't judge you and they're going to support you no matter what stage you're at in your journey. Like that is so key. And I don't think people realize just how much having that strong connection with other sisters can make or break you. It's so true. And I know people say if you just hold on to Allah, you're going to be totally good. And I mean, yeah, you got to hold on to that rope really strong, but you also have to have your human support system too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. So we actually have to wrap things up. Can you leave us with some, final thoughts or words of encouraging advice for those listening in on today's episode?
The one thing that I wish someone had said to me when I took Shahada was to never, ever, ever let go of my prayer. And I wish someone had told me that and had told me that it is there to do good for you. Like it really does alter your mood. And I did give up prayer at one point, and I remember how I felt emotionally, and it was not okay. And so if you ever sort of hit a low or you're starting to question or something like that, like just don't let go of that. No matter what, like even if you are dragging yourself into Fajr in the last 2 minutes of it, and you just feel like you're doing it robotically, just don't let go of that because it is affecting your heart in a positive way. And I think it's also really important not to forget why you took Shahada in the first place. Like what made you want to be a Muslim?
Right.
Never sort of forget that feeling of when you reverted and that intense love you had for Allah in that moment. Don't sort of let go of that.
Right, subhanAllah, beautiful advice. So that's it, you guys. That's it for this week's episode. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. And this is Khadija and Stephanie signing off. Assalamualaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you everyone for tuning in on today's episode. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram and join the community over at thecamelliasbloom.podcast. If you have feedback or you want to be a guest on the show and share your story, or even if you just need some support and you just need someone to talk to, please don't hesitate to email me at thecamelliasbloom.podcast@gmail.com. Assalamualaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.